Welcome to your Canadiens Connection on Rocket Sports Radio. We are proud to be the trusted source for all things Habs for more than a decade. This is the Canadiens Connection Podcast. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio. This is where we keep you informed, engaged, and entertained on one big old subject matter, and that is the Montreal Canadiens organization. We love to talk hockey here. We love to talk Habs hockey, and we're glad you're with us today. My name is Amy Johnson. I'll be your host for today's show, and that would be for episode 337 of Canadiens Connection. And with me to help out with this, as he does every week, couldn't do the show without my wonderful co-host. He also happens to be our founder and president here at Rocket Sports. His name is Rick Stevens. How you doing today?
Doing well, thanks. Happy March to you.
Happy March.
Yeah.
'Tis March.
And, well, not only is it spring, it's a good month for sports. You'll have NCAA tournaments. We've got MLB spring training. There was some F1 testing this past week. Mm-hmm. And of course, the NHL Trade Deadline that we're going to talk about shortly. And the other thing is, whatever you're going to call it, Mardi Gras, Fat Tuesday before Ash Wednesday. Mm-hmm. Got the Polish donuts for me is punchkis. Got to get your punchkis out there. What do you have something different in
the Pennsylvania Dutch call them fastnuts.
All right then.
Fastnuts.
Okay.
Spelled Fastnachts.
Tasty pastries, no matter what they're called.
Yes, yeah. Just give fried sweet dough. Just give it all to us, please.
Sometimes with fillings, sometimes with
powdered sugar.
Yeah. It's going to be a great week.
Did you bring snacks? Because I'm hungry.
I didn't.
Now I'm hungry.
I didn't.
Well, we're going to have a fun show for you today because do you feel the tingling in the air? The anticipation of the 2025 NHL Trade Deadline is upon us.
We have a trade to announce.
Yeah, we're going to be hearing that.
We are going to be hearing that. Yeah. Habs at the deadline. Who stays, who goes? That is the title of this week's episode. And we're going to tackle that in the second segment. But before we get there, we're going to take you through all of the news for the last week for the Montreal Canadiens. That includes recapping their 3 games from this past week coming off of the Four Nations face-off break. We're also going to get you updated on roster news, injury news. There's some major injury news to talk about. Give you a brief highlight on the Habs' own skills competition that they had at the Bell Center last weekend. We're going to give you a prospect report, let you know how Habs prospects in various leagues have fared in the past week. And, of course, we've got some big NHL general news in terms of this is the final week for everyone's trade boards and trade projections and predictions. And we're going to cover what 3 of the big ones have to say about what might happen with Kent Hughes and the Montreal Canadiens this week. All of that, of course, leading up to our big topics in the second segment, which is trade deadline week. What moves make sense for the Habs? And we're going to take a look, if anything. We're going to analyze if anything has changed as far as the game plan for Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton leading into this week. Take a look at the unrestricted free agents who could be more of trade bait, talk about some rumors and speculation that's been flying around with some of the mainstream national pundits and various reports that have been coming in, as well as how the Laval Rocket might play a part in all of that as well. And then, of course, in our final segment, it's when we turn the mic over to you. Basically, it's when we let you have your say. Each and every week, we ask a Canadiens Connection question of the week that we want all of you, our listeners and viewers, to answer. And then we take all of the answers and responses that we receive. We kind of collate the best ones together And then on the next show, we'll read them for all of you. So if you would like to get in on that, if you are new to the show or you just haven't, you hear the question of the week and you kind of answer it out loud to yourself, but you haven't submitted an answer yet, well, make this the week that you change that. And the way to do that is a number of ways. You can text us at our Rocket Sports text line. That is 585-3-ROCKET. That's 585-3-ROCKET. If you're watching this on our YouTube channel, which you can find at InsideTheCanadiens.com, you can simply leave us a comment on YouTube. You can also hit us up on social media at Habs Connection on X, Facebook, and Instagram. However you do it, just send in your answers, and that gives you a very good shot at having your thoughts, your opinions, your bold statements, predictions read out loud for thousands of Habs fans to hear next week on the show. All right, so let's get to it. Here's what's happened as far as Canadiens games since the last time we were here. 3 games this week. They played Ottawa, Carolina, and San Jose. They certainly set the tone last Saturday with a game in Ottawa against the Senators.
Was it in Ottawa? It didn't sound
it
like
didn't
it.
Sound like it at all. My goodness.
The Olay in the first period.
Yeah,
that was fun.
It was definitely Habs fans took over that the Canadian Tire Center that night.
Yeah.
But Montreal came out on top 5-2 with a big game for Juraj Slafkovsky.
Yeah. Oh, we heard that Juraj Slafkovsky was brooding over the February break. He wasn't happy with his game. He wanted to make a difference, and to do that, he was examining his identity. And he watched Brady Tkachuk during the February break, and he said to be like Brady Tkachuk, he was going to have to play angry. And he did that. He certainly did that. And it was an impact game for him. 1 goal, 5 shots, 8 hits, and a fight with Ridley Gregg. Now, the only thing is doing that, and he understands it, doing that consistently night after night after night, which is easier said than done.
Absolutely. So then a few nights later on Tuesday night, they were back at the Bell Center taking on the Carolina Hurricanes. This was the first time that they were playing against the Canes now that Mikko Rantanen was on board with them. I honestly expected this game to either be very close or for the Carolina to run away with it. I did not expect a 4-0 shutout by the Montreal Canadiens. So hooray for back-to-back victories coming off of the break. But man, that was like, sometimes when you say that was a hard game to watch, it's just because like play is bad but this was just boring.
Yeah, in fact, the folks at La Presse said it was the most boring win all season. It certainly wasn't a pretty game. The Carolina Hurricanes, good team, solid roster, but look a little bit discombobulated these days. And it was the Hurricanes that were hitting the posts and near misses, and the Habs with all the bounces. Marty St. had said during their losing streak that there was games they should have won. This is one that was just the opposite. They probably should have lost, but they got all of the puck luck in this one.
They did. And it might come as a surprise that after what's on paper looks like they handily beat the Carolina Hurricanes. On paper, I say that, by a 4-0 shutout. It might have come as a bit of a surprise that then 2 nights later when they were hosting the San Jose Sharks, the worst team in the league, they barely eked out a win, winning 4-3 in overtime.
Yeah, just squeaked out the win. Worst team in the league, as you said. It was an awful performance by the Canadiens. Like really awful. They were there was turnovers all over the ice, bad goaltending, weak goals allowed. They were really fortunate to get the 2 points here. Arber Xhekaj, I guess he took the brunt of Marty St. Louis' frustrations, and he was for the most part benched in the third period, just 1 3-second shift. He kind of got beat at the end of the second period on the Will Smith goal. Gee, when's Mike Matheson going to get benched for all of his? Anyway, bad question. I'm sorry. Yes, our Bergerac guy was the scapegoat for this one, but the Canadiens eked out the win and 3-0 on the week.
Absolutely. So that leaves them through 59 games played. They are 28, 26, and 5. That's good for 61 points, 7th in the Atlantic Division, 23rd overall in the NHL. But all is not bad news. The captain has 8 points in his last 3 games. Yeah,
he watched that. I think he wished that he was playing in the Four Nations face-off. Yeah, he probably maybe regrets the decision not to go his own decision not to go to the Worlds. And he's come back with a vengeance and has played great the last 3 games. Lane Hutson is the other one who received a bit of a milestone, being talked about in the same breath as Nicholas Lidstrom. That being, Lane Hutson is the first rookie defenseman to collect 40 assists in fewer than 60 games since Nicholas Lidstrom did it in 1991-92. So high praise for Hutson right there.
Now, if you think 10.5% chance odds of making the playoffs is a good chance, well, then you're going to be pretty happy right now. But that's what they're at. They're on pace for an 85-point season. I'm still not convinced that that's, I wouldn't be optimistic with a 10% chance of making the playoffs.
Saw a lot of comments on social media. 85 points, well, that'll get us to the playoffs. No, I don't think so. Last year, the 2 wildcard teams had 92 points and 98 points, respectively. So it's you got to get into the 90, and I don't think the Montreal Canadiens, unless they really go on a tear, are going to get there, and that's why they're listed at a 10.5% chance of making the playoffs. They have the 12th best odds of winning the draft lottery, and their strength of schedule is still relatively easy, 24th in the league with 23 games remaining.
If you want to talk about some roster news, I think the big celebration this week was that Emil Heineman returned to the lineup last Saturday, just immediately following the Four Nations break. Is it just coincidence that they won 3 games this week with him back? Is that just a coincidence? It's
amazing how things fall into place with Heineman in the lineup. And, you can look at the 3 games this past week and, the Canadiens are 3-0. But if you look back a couple of months, back to December 17th, love this stat, that the Habs are 12-2-1 with Heineman in the lineup, 5-8-1 without.
All right.
Yeah, there you go.
On Monday, Mr. Owen Beck was recalled from the Laval Rocket, centering the second line with Patrick Laine and Alex Newhook. He was centering the second line in place of Kirby Dach, who was out with a lower body injury, which we're going to talk about a little bit more in just a moment. But that meant Beck called up from the AHL and inserted right on the second line with Laine and Newhook.
And inserted at center. His earlier call-up, he was playing the wing, playing down in the lineup, didn't look as comfortable. He didn't look out of place at all in the top 6. And even face-offs, I think he's around 53% on face-offs. He was very good this past week, and he registered his. It's been a few games, but he registered his first NHL point. He got an assist in the game against the Sharks.
Now, if you want a bit of a mystery, this is when I start to get frustrated, because we've gone through this song and dance before. What is going on with Josh Anderson? Is he injured? Is he not? Is he fatigued? What's going on? Because once again, he's taking therapy days like they're handing them out for free on a street corner somewhere. He's playing, but he's not practicing.
Yeah, he missed practice again on Friday for a therapy day. It appears that he's dealing with multiple injuries, and even this past week, mid-game, heading down the tunnel, and then returning. So I don't know why the usage, if the Canadiens are not going to make the playoffs, why they're keeping him in the lineup, maybe hoping for a trade, although his value isn't, a year, 18 months ago, the Hughes' phone was ringing off the hook, offers for Josh Anderson. Hughes chose to keep Hughes. His patience has paid off in let's say the Lehkonen trade. His patience has hurt him in situations like Josh Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
All that said, Josh Anderson was on the plane to Buffalo and is likely to be in the lineup against the Sabres on Saturday night.
So while we might not be getting very much transparency in terms of what is going on physically with Josh Anderson, it did not take long to get I won't say full. I'll say decent transparency on what's going on with Kirby Dach that instigated the recall of Owen Beck from Laval earlier this week. And that's because Kirby Dach is effectively shut down for the rest of the season after undergoing successful surgery to his right knee in Montreal this week.
Yeah, that's tough. That's his same knee. That's the same knee that he had repaired last season. We know he's had a really difficult year, a really slow start. We've seen small, tiny glimpses just before Christmas. He went on a bit of a streak of the Kirby Dach that many hope will be impactful in the Canadiens lineup, but it's been few and far between. And there was some. I guess trying to understand as he returned and kind of putting him in the same context of Cole Caulfield. Cole Caulfield last season needed a year to readjust after his shoulder surgery. Could Kirby Dach this season, take most of the season to get back on his feet, so to speak, and then show something in the final 20 some odd games? That's not going to happen, unfortunately. Out again with the surgery to his knee. And we should say that, when asked to explain, Kirby Dach said he was feeling fine. He wasn't feeling lingering effects of the recovery from last season. So it's really hard to understand. And we think about not this past training camp, but the one before, where he and Juraj Slafkovsky were put together and looked like they were going to dominate. Even on this podcast at that point, we had talked about Kirby Dach challenging for the number one. He was better than Nick Suzuki at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And things have gone steadily downhill. He's even his lack of production. There is his lack of production this year, but also his goal differential -29 is one of the worst in the National Hockey League. He hasn't been his physical self. Moved off the center position, and so it's really difficult. He hasn't gone past the 60 game mark in the 3 years with the Montreal Canadiens. I think it was La Presse that said that he has participated in 60% over his career, 60% of the games that he's eligible for. And that's not what you need if you're counting on a guy to be in your top six. Again, really tough season for Kirby Dach. But this kind of changes things for long-term for the Montreal Canadiens that suddenly have to go shopping for a second-line center.
Absolutely. Wish Kirby Dach a speedy recovery. It's unfortunate news, and it's disappointing to be sure. What also has been disappointing for me this week is, we said jokingly, was it a coincidence that the Habs won 3 games with Emil Heineman back in the lineup? And there's no denying that Emil Heineman certainly has a positive effect on the lineup when he is in it. However, as we mentioned in the recap, there was one game that they looked completely terrible against San Jose. There was another game where they just got a lot of lucky bounces, and they happened to win that game. What disappoints me is that I don't think that it's necessarily because of the goaltender that they won those 3 games, and they have started Sam Montembeault for all 3 games this past week since they got back from 4 Nations. Jakub Dobeš finally gets to get a start tonight on Saturday night against the Buffalo Sabres. Is there any particular reason why he couldn't have gotten one of the 3 games this past week?
Yeah, you might have played him against, well, any of the
Any of them.
But Sam Montembeault hadn't had any action over the February break, so natural for him to play against Ottawa. If you felt that Montembeault had a better chance of beating Carolina, okay. Although in the past it's Dobeš who's been getting the tougher starts, but at the very least you could have started him on Thursday night against San Jose and didn't. So when he starts Saturday night, it's going to be just short of 3 weeks since he's had his last start. Last start was Sunday, February the 9th. And that's not good for a young goalie. It's not good for him to miss that much time in game action. It's not good for his confidence. It's not good for anything. And we know that, folks praise Marty St. Louis for things that he does well. And I think it's only fair to point out things he doesn't do so well. And one of the things he doesn't do well at all is manage his goaltenders. We saw that last season. We've seen that this season with Caden Primo sitting a month and on and on and on. Good for Dobeš to get back in the lineup. Would like to be seeing more rather than less of him. But this is a home and home Buffalo on Saturday and Monday. Dobeš on Saturday night in Buffalo. Expect Sam Montembeault to get the easier assignment in Montreal on Monday night.
And the last but not least, if you were curious, if you didn't catch the highlights from the Habs skills competition, their annual skills competition that they hold at the Bell Center, that happened last Sunday. Fastest skater? Are you surprised that it's Alex Newhook?
No, he did. He had fastest skater last year. If you need it for your notes, his lap was 13.5 seconds. Down a little bit from, I think it was 13.3 thereabouts last season. And there was certainly other events, but the 2 premier events are fastest skater and hardest shot. And that again, as it did last year, went to Arber Xhekaj at 101 miles per hour. Last season, he was up 107. Wow. A little bit down this year, but he still took the title. And of course, it's just a fun event for fans, for kids. There was autograph sessions. Suzuki and Caulfield seemed to be the most popular in that regard. But yeah, just a really fun event.
All right. Well, let's check in on the Habs prospects right now.
It's time for the Rocket Report. The Rocket Sports Media Team is your premier source for information about the Laval Rocket, the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens, as well as Habs prospects playing in the CHL, NCAA, and leagues around the world.
We're starting with some goaltending news. Habs goaltender Quentin Miller has made an NCAA commitment for next season. He has committed to the University of Denver.
Remember a few weeks back, we talked about Quentin Miller and how odd it was at the time that he had moved from the QMJHL to the BCHL, which we thought was very odd that there was no team in the Q that was willing to take him on. We remember he had been with the Remparts, that Memorial Cup winning team. He was the backup in that. Then there was a trade to Rimouski. And then there was in that time there was an injury, had shoulder surgery. He was out a long time, 5-6 months. Anyway, then and the first part of this season, then signed up with the Chilliwack Chiefs, and he's had a perfect record, 4 wins with them so far this season, .933 save percentage, 175 goals against, and he announced that he has committed to the University of Denver. We know that the University of Denver is one of the best Division I programs in the U.S. So this is a big deal, and it's also evidence of that new agreement between the new rules that allow the CHL players to jump to the NCAA. The good thing for Quentin Miller and the Montreal Canadiens is it kind of resets his eligibility clock. So he gets 4 years now where the Canadiens don't have to make a decision about him. And remember that he was a 4th round pick in 2023. So, he's had injury issues. He's had some struggles, but still promising prospect. And this gives him some time to develop in a very, very, very good college program.
Switching from NCAA to European hockey, Oliver Kapanen continuing to have a tremendous season over in the SHL playing for Timrå. Had a goal and an assist in a big win over Frölunda this week.
Indeed, he did, and he's playing at a point-a-game pace, 14 goals, 16 assists for 30 points in 31 games. He had that, with the Canadiens for 12 games to start the season, and then the Canadiens with him decided he would be best served by playing in the SHL this season, and he's been tremendous.
He has. Has Jacob Fowler been tremendous?
Yeah. Other than, if you ask him, he still has issues with what happened in the bean
saddle about
the bean pot.
Yeah,
but otherwise, absolutely spectacular. 2 more wins for him this week. 23-5-1 record, 170 goals against, and raised his save percentage to .937.
When it comes to the Laval Rocket in the AHL, we've got some good news and bad news. Couple of things in the good news category. They won one game. They split their games this week. They lost a 3-2 match to Syracuse this week, and then they had one of those 11 a.m. school day games against Toronto on Wednesday afternoon. 11 o'clock in the morning.
It was screaming kids.
Yeah, they. Needless to say, the Rocket didn't really look awake. They lost, but they managed to win it 5-4. I didn't think they were going to, but they did manage to win that one 5-4.
Well, it seems they took a nap with about 5 minutes to go.
Yeah.
Almost blew that 3-goal lead. That was very.
It came
up
very
5-2,
close,
and the Marlies scored 2 late goals, and almost
one of them was 4 seconds with 4 seconds left.
Yeah, that was. But they got the win.
Caden Primo was sweating. He was sweating at that point. That was a little dicey. So they are 33-15-2-1 on the season. They are still second overall in the North Division and still second overall in the AHL. The other piece of good news, Sean Farrell has quietly awakened. He has 15 points in his last 10 games.
I remember a question as before Christmas, on our @Rocket Sports Twitter account or X account, and to Rocket Sports, to Chris G, about what's Sean Farrell doing? Why is he even in the lineup? And good on Sean Farrell, who persisted, focused on the fundamentals. Focused on being a better forechecker, and the points have followed. He's been great.
He's had those 15 points have been 8 goals and 7 assists in his last 10 games.
Yeah.
Really tremendous, and I hope he continues that. Now for the bad news. 2 injuries to the Laval Rocket that are not good timing. Forward Philip Méchard has an upper body injury. He's going to be out for up to 6 weeks. This is the second long-term absence that Méchard is going to have to deal with this season, which is quite unfortunate for him.
Yeah, almost a write-off season for him. He hasn't been impactful when he's been in the lineup and been out of the lineup a lot.
He has. Also, defenseman Noel Hoffenmeyer, he has a lower body injury, is going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. So coming down the stretch here, leading into what will be a playoff run for the Laval Rocket, missing a forward and a key defenseman.
A key defenseman is right. A really good add to Laval this year.
Yeah,
Hoffenmeyer's not talked about because he's not a young prospect, but really solid on the back end, and he's going to be needed for the playoffs.
That's for sure. Trois Rivières is just chugging along. They did lose one of their games to Adirondack this week, but they won the other one. And they played the Norfolk Admirals this week as well.
Well, at least a change of scenery after 7 games straight against Adirondack.
Seriously, enough already.
Yeah.
The Lions currently with 75 points. They are still sitting at second overall in the ECHL, doing just fine. You know who wasn't doing just fine? I don't know if I want to say that it was Marty St. wasn't doing just fine or the Habs in general weren't doing just fine, because they certainly sparked some ire from the coach this week at practice when he really lost his temper. And we'd love to play the audio for you, but we have a strict no profanity rule here on our family-friendly show, because we know that there are lots of young adults and kids that listen. Some dads and sons listen as well. And so we stick by that no profanity. So we can't play this clip for you, but we can talk about it.
It has been censored. The Marty St. Louis just completely lost his temper in practice and basically said, just blew the whistle, stopped the practice and said, "Wake up." And he added some other colorful words in
between there. Yeah.
He basically said, re-explain the drill. There's 3 reds, 3 whites. There's 20 guys on the ice. Why aren't you passing? That sort of thing.
Do you get that?
Is it that hard?
Yeah.
I think was his question. He knows, and I think the players know too, that despite the 3 wins, and this was in practice on Friday after the 3 wins, but he knows that his team didn't play particularly well this week, and was very frustrated with how they were practicing on Friday.
The NHL has some excitement this week, and it's not just because the trade deadline is coming up in just a matter of days. Today, Saturday, it's the Stadium Series game at the Shoe. That is, if you're not familiar with NCAA football, that is the home of Ohio State, their stadium, where the Red Wings and Blue Jackets are going to face off outside this evening, and they're just expecting a few people.
90,000 people expected for this game, this outdoor game. Another interesting little feature. And, at first I didn't think I was going to like it, but the football style helmets that they'll be wearing, actually kind of cool. I don't mind them at all.
Now, are they trucking the cannon out there?
I don't know. I don't know. They need a bigger cannon, I think.
I will say, both uniforms look great. Columbus going with the big cannon logo on theirs. Detroit is, since they are red and white, which is the colors of Ohio State, that the Red Wings uniform is very football uniform-like. And so, with their nod to Ohio State. So I really think both uniforms look great. It should be a fun event later on this evening. What's probably not going to be so fun is the course of the next 6 days as we count down to 3 p.m. on Friday when the trade deadline arrives. And so, of course, all of the pundits are scrambling to get their final question mark, trade boards out. We'll start with The Athletic and Chris Johnston, who's got his 7th iteration of his NHL trade board, and there are 3 Canadiens on it.
Yeah, add Yoel Armia, Jake Evans, and David Savard. No surprises there. They bumped up and they bumped down. We have on Chris Johnston's board, Armia and Evans sitting 14th and 15th, most likely to be traded, respectively. David Savard coming in at 32. I think that the 14th and 15th designation is due to the fact that they're expected to be traded together, which is not an easy thing.
No, not at all. Moving to TSN, they've got their trade bait board. We see the same 3 guys appear on there, but just kind of falling in different places in the lineup.
Yeah, on TSN, Jake Evans at 17, Yoel Armia at 18, and David Savard at 29. So more or less similar sorts of what comments, as I said earlier.
And Frank Saravelli over at Daily Faceoff, things look a little different with Frank Saravelli. First of all, there are 4 Habs players on this board, and significantly, a couple of them are higher up.
He has Jake Evans at number 4, and with or without Yoel Armia, Frank Saravelli is indicating there that Jake Evans is going to be traded. And we'll talk about that more in our second segment when we go through the trade deadline week for the Canadiens. But then Armia comes in kind of where he is on the other boards at 11. David Savard, again, like he is on the other boards at 35. Was David Savard a lot higher on this list last season? Absolutely, he was. And, Kent Hughes was getting all kinds of calls. He insisted that he wanted a first-round pick back for David Savard. Didn't get that offer, so he's hung on to David Savard. And those offers, I remember at the time there were a few accounts on social media, a few of the Montreal media saying, "Don't worry, just keep him, and he'll get the same offers next season." Mm-hmm. Well, his game has declined considerably, and David Savard is, if traded, is not getting anywhere near that value back. On Frank Saravelli's board, he's also added that was Savard at 35, while Josh Anderson is at 39, and same applies to David Savard, that his value has decreased over the past year.
Absolutely. Well, why wait any longer to really get into the nitty-gritty about the trade deadline this week and what it means for the Habs? So with that being said, we are just going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to hear a very brand new offer from our sponsor and friends over at DraftKings. You're going to want to check that out. Special incentive for our listeners and viewers. And then on the other side of it, we're getting to our big topic segment, trade deadline week. What moves make sense for the Habs? We are going to talk about that in depth just after this. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio.
It might not feel like it, but spring is right around the corner. Do you know how you can tell? Golfers are hitting the links, and we have some tournaments to talk about. And if you want to do more than just talk, well, put your money where your mouth is. Get in on all the tee to green action with DraftKings Sportsbook. From Thursday's opening round through the closing round on Sunday, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with tournament props, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Now, if you've never bet on golf before, it's easier than you think. Just pick something simple like a golfer to win the tourney and make your pick. It's just that easy. And here's something special for first-timers. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas, 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. New customers only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
And welcome back to the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio. Don't forget, my name is Amy Johnson. If you'd like to follow me and my hockey coverage over on X, you can do so at Flyers Rule. Same goes for our president and founder of Rocket Sports, who is here with me as my co-host in the studio, Rick Stevens. You're going to want to follow him at Rocket Sports on X. A couple of homework assignments. Don't forget to subscribe to the show. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel over at InsideTheCanadiens.com. And also make sure you're following at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. All right. Can you believe it? We are just days away from the NHL Trade Deadline. It's here already. And you know when it's getting close because right around this time every year, press row gets jammed with scouts from all over the league at Canadiens games. And of course, the phone has started ringing off the hook for GM Kent Hughes as he's fielding calls from the contenders all around the league who want to bulk up their rosters down the stretch. And his team, obviously, primarily going to be sellers at the deadline.
We have a trade to announce.
Oh,
no.
Gary's interrupting.
Oh, boy.
What is it, Gary?
Okay, I can say it's not a Habs trade,
No.
but there was a pretty significant trade that just went down today between the Rangers and the Avalanche.
5-player trade. That's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
Involving a Lindgren, not the one, not the former Canadian, but a Lindgren brother, and Colorado Avalanche went out and added Ryan Lindgren and Jimmy Vesey, as well as the rights for Hank Kempf. And going to the Rangers is Calvin DeHaan, UC Parsinen, and two conditional draft choices in the 2025 NHL draft, a second and a fourth round pick.
Okay.
Yeah. So Rangers getting some value, and they had unrestricted free agent in there, Colorado adding some grit and toughness in Ryan Lindgren as they get closer to the playoffs.
Lindgren brothers not going to be playing against each other quite so often. Family will have to travel a little farther to see both of them play. All right, so didn't mean to frighten anyone. It was not a Habs trade, but let's get back to the Habs. The question for this segment really is who's most likely to be on the move for the Canadiens this week. Does Hughes have a shopping list of his own that he wants filled by the end of the week? I think those are some very valid questions, and I think we're starting over the last few weeks have started to kind of get an idea of what the answers to those things might be. Are they a buyer or a seller? I think it's pretty safe to say sell early and often.
Yeah, I think that after the 3 wins this week, there was conversation by fans that would have some impact on Kent Hughes's the direction that he goes in at the trade deadline. I think his plans were I'm almost certain his plans were in place prior to the Four Nations face-off. As we know that the Canadiens lost 8 of 9 games going into the February break, and I think that settled it. Kent Hughes has said he would leave it in the hands of the players as far as to direct his actions, and I think they gave him Not intentionally, of course, but they told him which direction to go in, and that is of a seller. We heard Nick Suzuki this past week say he's tired of being in the position of losing players, and there's been lots of conversation about from fans whether Kent Hughes would demotivate the players by making a trade before the deadline. Players know. Players
Just be professionals here.
They know that they're not deluding themselves with the fact that they're going to make the playoffs. They know what the odds mean, and listen, they would be absolutely sorry to see a teammate go, but they understand it's a business. And in the same way, Marty St. acts the same way. He gets all grumpy and about losing a player, and it has made his thoughts known and his feelings known in the past. But we have to think long term, and Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton have said we can't veer from our plan here. And the plan would include getting assets for players who are unrestricted free agents.
And there's more than a couple of them. At the NHL level right now, there are 5 of them. Jake Evans, Yoel Armia, David Savard, Christian Dvorak, and Michael Pezzetta.
And that's kind of, I think the way you've read them there are in the order of likelihood that they're going to be traded, more or less. Evans, Evans has been on the market for a long time. There have been contract negotiations. We've heard last week from Pierre LeBrun that those contract negotiations are far apart, and that everything is pointing to a trade for Jake Evans. Yoel Armia is next on the list, and we heard from LeBrun that the Canadiens are trying to package those two players together, and that this week we heard that Kent Hughes is telling teams that they don't have to. They have draft picks. They don't have to trade both players, but if they get the right offer, and they're looking for probably a second-round pick for Jake Evans, a first-round pick if they can get it for the package deal for Evans and Armia. And we know that Hughes has been patient in the past, and once he sets his price, he typically sticks to it. The third player that you mentioned in that list was David Savard. What's going to happen there? I think that the Canadiens wouldn't be too unhappy to keep him. Of course, his value has gone way, way down, and to fill a hole till the end of the season and let him gracefully end his time in Montreal is probably what's likely to happen there. Christian Dvorak, there's not much of a market. Although a little bit of market, because he can win faceoffs, he can kill penalties, he can be a defensive forward. So there might be a bit of a market there. And Michael Pezzetta, the fifth name mentioned, no market at all for Michael Pezzetta.
It's hard when you don't play.
Well, yeah, and he hasn't earned his way for additional starts once he's been in the lineup. In Laval, a whole different story. Those are the guys that those unrestricted free agents in Laval have been very good additions. Pretty much every single one of them, and I don't see them going anywhere. They're going to help with the stretch run and into the playoffs. In Gignac, Barry Boulay, Condata, the captain, and Connor Hughes, who's been playing a backup role in goal.
This is the point before we move on in this discussion that I make my annual public service announcement as a reminder to everyone next Friday. Do not be surprised if you see a number of paper transactions sending guys like Owen Beck, quote unquote, down to Laval. only to have them recalled the next day. Just a reminder that the reason to do that is that in order for any player to be eligible to play in the AHL Calder Cup playoffs, they must be on the AHL roster by 3 p.m. on NHL Trade Deadline Day. And so obviously, particularly this year, we know that Laval is going to make the playoffs, so it is exceptionally likely that we will see paper transactions of guys that Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon are going to want to contribute to Laval's playoff run in the postseason get sent down on paper transactions, but likely then recalled afterwards.
All right, let's jump ahead then to Laval, and because that is an important point. Also, there is a maximum. There are 4 call-ups maximum, non-injury related, that the NHL team can do after the trade deadline. So you mentioned that players will be papered down and then come back up. So let's speculate. Going to be Dobish, going to be Heineman, going to be Owen Beck. That will be papered down so they're eligible for the playoffs in Laval and then be brought back up. That leaves just one more that the Canadiens can use. Again, if it's an injury situation, that's a whole different ball of wax.
Emergency call-ups are kind of unlimited.
But let's say David Reinbacher, but it might also be because Owen Beck is up now, but if there's a trade involving Evans and Armia, are they going to need another player from or two from Laval? So this is going to be interesting to watch the numbers game. I mentioned Evans and Armia. Who are the folks? Who are the teams that are looking for one of those players, or maybe both of those players? And Pierre LeBrun says the list includes the Winnipeg Jets, the Maple Leafs, the Oilers, the New Jersey Devils, and the Minnesota Wild. And to support that claim about the Wild being interested in both Evans and Armia, Michael Russo, you probably know him if you followed the Minnesota Wild at all on X this week. He said, quote, "It's a no-brainer for Bill Guerin to go after an Armia Evans PK tag team at this point. Like, enough is enough with this penalty kill." So
that's a good point.
Minnesota Wild hoping to go places in the playoffs, but they'll need a better penalty killer. And who better than Evans and Armia being excellent penalty killers with the added bonus of being a threat for shorthanded goals.
Now, we talked about, of course, there's the part you have to keep in mind in regards to paper transactions with AHL-bound players for the playoffs. The other thing that you have to kind of keep in mind through this whole process is retention slots. And Canadiens have already used 2 of them.
They've used 2.
Of the 3 that they have available.
They have 3 available total. 2 of them are gone with the transactions involving Jeff Petrie and Jake Allen from some time ago. The third slot, Kent Hughes has said he kind of likes to have around the draft, but if there's a deal to be had, he can wait a few days, and that all restocks as of July 1st, so to speak. I think that if David Savard is moved at all, that's the place where they're going to have to retain salary on David Savard. Team is not going to take David Savard on, so maybe he'll hang on to that retention slot for a possible David Savard trade, or Christian Dvorak as well.
That's true. It's going to be really interesting to see who, if any or all of them get moved. The only thing that has now changed this week is losing Kirby Dach for the season now.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that leaves a hole in the roster. Owen Beck is currently filling it, but as you talked about in the first segment, this means it's kind of a nothing burger of a season for Kirby Dach once again. And how much does Kirby Dach getting shut down with another knee surgery change things in terms of the trade deadline and his future with the Canadiens?
Well, if you follow social media, you think it changes Hughes's trade deadline a lot. I don't follow that. There's lots of fans encouraging the general manager to go out and make a trade at the trade deadline to acquire a second line center. I don't think that's going to happen. The number available is going to be pretty small. Teams who are going to the playoffs are going to want to keep those guys, obviously. So that's much more likely at the draft during the summer. Do the Canadiens need a second line center? Absolutely. And I think that was probably, it's safe to say that they had come to that conclusion even prior to Kirby Dach's injury. The injury just kind of made it 100%, but it was clear that Kirby Dach, he had been shifted to the wing, and that it was unlikely that he was going to be able to fill that second line center spot when the Canadiens are become contenders. So that was on their shopping list in pencil. It's been put in pen and marker and chiseled into granite now. But that don't expect to see anything on that front during this next week. That's going to come up in a few months' time.
Oh, it's going to be a week. I love the lead up to the trade deadline because there's so much anticipation, but I also hate from a media standpoint because you literally can't walk away from Twitter and you have to refresh it every 5 minutes because you're afraid you're missing something.
Well, and that's just it. Don't just show up on Friday morning
for Trade Center
because the majority of the action is likely to happen.
That's right.
As it already has started with the New York Rangers Colorado Avalanche on Saturday, and that's likely to snowball some trades early in the week.
So as we get through this week leading up to the trade deadline, our Canadiens Connection question of the week for you. Let's have some fun this week. What's your dream trade scenario for the Canadiens before the deadline this Friday? What is your if you could have, like, on a silver platter, your best trade scenario for Kent Hughes leading up to this trade deadline, what would it be? And it'll be really interesting to see what
not the Bedard ones, not the McDavid ones, but
like
other than
something
that,
realistic. But
yeah.
what would be your dream trade scenario? Send us a text at the Rocket Sports text line 5853-ROCKET. Send us an email, hello@rocketsportsmedia.com. Leave us a comment on our YouTube channel, InsideTheCanadiens.com, or hit us up on social media at Habs Connection on X, Facebook, or Instagram. Can't wait to see what you all come up with and which ones of you maybe end up being right, because we'll be able to know that. We'll be able to tell you that next week on the show, in addition to what kinds of dream scenarios you came up with. So can't wait to hear from all of you. And in fact, you don't have to wait for too long, because coming up in our next segment, we are going to hear from some of you in response to last week's Canadiens Connection question of the week. Had some really great responses. Maybe yours is one of them. To find out, stick around. You're listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio. It might not feel like it, but spring is right around the corner. Do you know how you can tell? Golfers are hitting the links, and we have some tournaments to talk about. And if you want to do more than just talk, well, put your money where your mouth is. Get in on all the tee to green action with DraftKings Sportsbook. From Thursday's opening round through the closing round on Sunday, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with tournament props, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Now, if you've never bet on golf before, it's easier than you think. Just pick something simple like a golfer to win the tourney and make your pick. It's just that easy. And here's something special for first-timers. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN.
That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas, 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. New customers only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
Welcome back to episode 337 of the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. Hey, if you've been enjoying today's episode and you haven't subscribed to the show yet, what are you waiting for? Just take a minute and tap that subscribe button. We don't ever want you to miss an episode. The podcast comes out every Saturday afternoon on Spotify, Apple Music, all of your favorite podcast platforms. If YouTube is more of your thing, we release the podcast the following Monday on YouTube every week. So you could subscribe there. InsideTheCanadiens.com will take you directly to our YouTube page. And you can watch the podcast there if you'd like. So just don't forget to subscribe. If you do listen on a podcast platform that allows you to leave a review, we would be so grateful if you could take a moment just to do that. Just tap that 5-star review. Helps to tell your podcast platform algorithm that, hey, if you're a Habs fan, you're going to want to listen to this podcast, which we would really appreciate. And if you'd like to take it one step further, just tap that share button while you're at it and share this episode with your social media followers. We are going to get now to your responses to the Canadiens Connection question of the week from last week. Before I do that, though, let's remind you of what this week's Canadiens Connection question of the week is. Don't forget, we want you to send in your responses. We've given you all the ways to do that, and then you have a chance to be heard. If we think you've got a great answer, then we're going to read it on next week's show. So this week we're asking you, what is your dream trade scenario for the Canadiens before this week's NHL Trade Deadline?
I've been thinking about that, and we encourage people. We encourage our writers, our colleagues. We encourage the fans to think big. That's a phrase we've used before, but also think small, because you're going to hear some names maybe you don't recognize, and you say, what in the world is Kent Hughes doing? Who is that? What player is that? We may even have to text Patrick Williams to say, who is this player? But that is because I think that Kent Hughes is going to have an eye on shoring up holes in the Rocket lineup for the playoff push. So he may make a minor league trade or two, and don't get disappointed. It's because there's going to be, we know, Owen Beck has been recalled, and there may be others because of an Evans Armia trade there that's going to cause holes in the Laval Rocket lineup, and Kent Hughes may have to make a trade to kind of fill those holes, shore up that lineup. They really are expecting a lot from the Rocket this year. The Rocket having a great season. They want to make sure there's no dip before the playoffs. And sure, they're going to get Owen Beck back. Dobush will join. Heineman will join. But they want to keep the momentum going right to the end of the regular season schedule. So just prepare yourself there that there may be some minor league trades as well.
And should make a note that the AHL trade deadline actually extends for 1 week past the NHL trade deadline. So yes, you might see some AHL level players involved with trades that Kent Hughes makes this week leading up to the NHL trade deadline, but he can then continue to make AHL trades for the following week past that as well. So got a little bit of time there.
And you know what? The trade, this is going to be an incredible week with the trade deadline and all. And just before the trade deadline, yes, we've been involved in a new project, and it's going to launch before the trade deadline. What a perfect time. We've been involved with some guys and gals that we like working with. And there's no, I'm not going to reveal who the NHLer, the former NHL, you'll know his name, obviously, player who's been involved in this new project. It's Hockey Hot Stove, hockeyhotstove.com. Going to launch this week, and just one other place for you to find and enjoy our content, along with some great, really solid senior hockey writers from around the league. It's a great collaboration, and just one more place that you're going to find an opportunity to consume all our content.
That's right. And we will have more information for you about that after things officially launch. So don't forget this week's Canadiens Connection of the Week that we want question of the week that we want to hear from you. What is your dream trade scenario for the Canadiens before the deadline? Now, last week, we asked you, what's the one thing that you want to see from the Habs in these final 8 weeks of the season? And we did have some great responses to that. Let's see. Over on YouTube, we had @CenterHeist7948. He says, "Wow, the two of you do such a great job with episodes and coming up with these great questions weekly. Always thinking on your toes." Thank you very much. We're glad you have fun with them. We appreciate that you always send in an answer. Center Heist goes on to say, "The one thing I want to see with the Habs for the final stretch is 100% effort all the way to the end."
Amen.
Did he get that this week? I'm not sure.
Not yet.
I'm not sure.
We're working up to it.
All right. He goes on to say, "And I'm so impressed that I was wrong about the U.S.-Canada final. Yes." And P.S., I know my reply is after the first game back from the break. I just want to add, this is how Slav has to play to have a successful career. He played awesome against Ottawa, but now if he can do that consistently. Love the show. Thank you very much, Center Heist. We love your response, and keep them coming.
Consistency is the key. Next up, we have, this comes from @ubasic on YouTube. Here's a thought. Marty said that he didn't watch the series, the Tournament of Four Nations. I hear this. Patrick Lina took his ice time beef public at a world event. I think that Marty St. Louis was steaming mad and couldn't say anything without showing his anger and embarrassment at his locker room loyalty being broken. Once again, Lina says something inappropriate and out of touch with how it affects his team, in my opinion, of course. Marty's a proud coach. I wouldn't cross him like that. Thanks for the storylines. We had 8 of them in a bonus last week that you should be watching for. Seems like they're related to me. Yeah, they're related. Marty not watching the game? ? Find that hard to believe. Thanks, guys. We found it very hard to believe as well.
That's right. And then @Habinations comes in with a comment saying, "Amusing." Now, this one's directed at you.
Me?
Yeah.
What did I do?
"Amusing you won't go back on your Binny talk." And this is in reference to the fact that despite the fact that, yes, Jordan Binnington was hailed as the hero of the Canadian victory over the U.S. in overtime, that you kind of, as you do appropriately on this show, you kept things real and realistic and said, okay, yeah, he had a great overtime, but he also struggled an awful lot, particularly at the beginning of the tournament. And so Habinations says it's amusing that you won't go back on your Binny talk. You didn't change your tune. He says,
and I don't, I'm kind of being consistent, and I'll own my opinions. And I said it was fabulous. He played fabulous in the overtime.
Yeah.
But you want to roll the dice on that he's going to be Binner the winner every single time, 100% of the time, and struggle through the rest of the tournament. I just hope that by the time we get to the Olympics that there are other names in the conversation.
He goes on to say, "I wasn't a fan." It's still talking about Binnington. "I'm still not, but I didn't like Ed Belfour or Grant Fuhr either." "Sometimes when all the chips are in, you want a Binny in net, not a Hallie. I'm happy they put on a good show for us. Too bad players got hurt. For that reason alone, I don't want to see this format again. That's why I prefer amateur Olympics as well. Go Habs, go. And you know, Habinations, you are not alone in that thinking for tournaments like this, as well as for the Olympics, not letting the pro players go. You're not the only. There are certainly two very distinct sides of the fence on this view when it comes to letting NHL players play in other tournaments during the season.
Well, you heard me last week. I am full in agreement of Habinations there. I don't like the tournament in February, and the number of injuries that came out of the tournament didn't affect the Montreal Canadiens, but it's going to at some point. And then Habs fans will be furious that
that's right.
There was an injury that affected the rest of the season. He says you want Benny, not a Hallie. I don't know who he means. If he means Hellebuck, no. 99% of the time, I want
Connor
to
Hellebuck.
have the best goalie in the league. And currently, for many years, that was Carey Price. Currently, that's Connor Hellebuck. And yes, you want him in net.
Thank you very much, Habinations.
Great comment.
Great comment. We appreciate it. And make sure that you are one of the ones that gets your name tossed in the ring for getting your thoughts and comments and opinions heard by Habs fans all over the world. We can't pick your name and your comment if you don't submit it. So be sure you get your answer in to this week's Canadiens Connection question of the week. We'd love to read your comment on next week's show. It's going to be a busy week. Montreal is in Buffalo on Saturday night. It'll be Jakub Dobeš versus Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen.
You like saying that? No?
I do like saying Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. I cannot say just Luukkonen. I have to say Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. So it'll be a showdown against the Sabres in Buffalo on Saturday night. Then, as you mentioned earlier, it is a home and home. Buffalo travels to Montreal for a Monday night game, which is a little different. Then on Thursday, the Canadiens are out west playing the Edmonton Oilers. That's a 9 p.m. Eastern start time. And we casually mentioned this before. It also means that they will be all the way out west on the road on trade deadline eve, which might be a little unsettling for some of the guys that they won't be in the comfort of their homes for trade deadline eve.
And just to add to that, that's the start of a Western road trip. So it's not like they're
coming
out
back
to
that night.
No. It's Edmonton on Thursday, Calgary Saturday, Vancouver on the 11th, and then on the 12th, Seattle. So they're out there for a bit.
Yep. So they will be in a hotel for the trade deadline. So it's going to be a little nerve-wracking, I'm sure. And so, of course, that means 3 o'clock Friday, March 7th. That is the NHL trade deadline, which means the following day, Saturday, March 8th, when we are back for our very next episode of the Canadiens Connection podcast.
Perfectly timed.
Let's hope that we are going to have lots to talk about. We'll see what moves Kent Hughes makes this week. Fingers crossed. We appreciate you being here every week. We know you're just as excited to see what happens this week as we are, and we can't wait to talk to you about it next week on another really fun episode of the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio.
Click subscribe so you never miss an episode of Canadiens Connection. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Rocket Sports.